Hello, everyone, once again. Welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to our new product, Resilinc Workflows. Before we get started with today's presentation, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items to cover. First, today's webinar will be recorded and will be available on recording. You can reach out to your customer success managers who can share the recording with you, but the presentation will be shared with all participants after the webinar. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. All participants will be placed on mute. However, if you do have a question, please feel free to use the chat menu to send your question. We will try to answer all questions at the end of the session today, but if we don't get time, we will be sure to answer them by the close of business today. With that, let me kick things off with some introductions. My name is Hira Akhtar, and I'm Senior Manager of Customer Success at Resilinc. I manage the customer success team in the US and Europe, and my team and I are your best advocates and voice back to Resilinc. I'd also like to introduce and welcome Sandeep Ramachandran, who's Director of Product Management at Resilinc. Sandeep is responsible for a portfolio of products at Resilinc, including Resilinc Workflows that we're going to share with you today, reports and dashboards, and our AI product. Just to cover the agenda, so the quick goal for today is to give you guys a high-level overview of our new product launch, Resilinc Workflows. We'll be covering a light demo, starting off with kind of talking about Resilinc's SCRM ecosystem, what we're shifting to, and give you guys a perspective of what our thought process is. We at Resilinc at this point see data plus technology being an integral part of how we expand our capabilities to support you in your. To reiterate once again, we'll be open to Q&A at the end, but as questions come up, just feel free to pop them in that chat window. We'll queue them up and respond to it at the end of the hour. With that, let me hand the mic over to you, Sandeep. Why don't you give us a kind of an understanding of what you mean by Resilinc's supplier management ecosystem?
Sure. Thank you, Hira, for the introduction and setting the stage up here. Very good morning, good afternoon for folks joining us from all over the world here. I'm very excited to talk about the workflows today and walk you through what it is and how you can leverage it to manage your supply chain risks much more effectively and in fact, streamline your actions considering what we are all going through right now and the situation that we are all in. How could you use workflows on your day-to-day operations to manage your supply chain risk and protect the supply chain at the end of the day? I want to start by just go to the next slide here. There you go. Start by setting the stage on how the workflows become an integral part of the whole SCRM ecosystem, which allows you to take the data, the insights that we provide, and make those informed decisions, which in turn allow you to act upon it and close any gaps out there. So in the Resilinc supplier management ecosystem, the foundation, as you know, is the data that gets pulled in from various sources, such as the different event types that we monitor, the different languages that go along with it, the data from the supplier assessments that you might have launched, the impact confirmations during the events, so suppliers confirming whether they're impacted, the downtime information, the data that you provide us, the research that we do, and so on and so forth. Now, this becomes massive volumes of data, and how do you start consuming it and start to identify and prioritize what are the areas and scenarios that you need to focus on? And this is where the AVA, which is the AI engine, becomes very important, which uses the cognitive analytics and provides those prescriptive recommendations, offering the best possible action plans for you, of course, which allows you to reach those desired outcomes at the end of the day. And very importantly, still your objectives are still in sight. So that's where the data and the deep analysis brings, it comes together and you're now better informed to take those decisions. And once you have all those information, you're able to execute consistently by leveraging the automated workflows, the workflows that we are talking about, which would, bring in your processes, your mitigations, your playbook, your tasks and action, and all the collaboration that you do in that one place together, which pretty much closes up. It is pretty much like a closed loop which is from the data to your assessment and all the way up to closing any kind of gaps in your SCRM, which is the supply chain risk management program. So we now have this engine, which is now called as the workflows, which empowers your team to run the workflows, your mitigations and processes that we just mentioned. And more importantly, it gives you that confidence and more transparency across the work that you and your organization is performing, especially in this day and age where teams are spread across the globe with multiple data points and multiple actions that the teams have to be performing. You want to bring in more transparency, more togetherness, so that at the end of the day it is more seamless in whatever actions that you're taking and you're protecting the supply chain. That's where Workflows is bringing all that together. So as we talked about, data to decision making, that's what Resilinc Workflows is all about. Now, let's talk about workflow. Let's deep dive into it and explore together what is workflows. So previously, when we were researching in the market as well as talking to our customers, we didn't see any kind of softwares or categories out there in the supply chain space that described what Resilinc is able to do. There are these project management tools out there. There are these team collaboration systems. There are tools out there which very much require manual understanding and extraction of risks in the supply chain. There's so much of information available out there, but everything requires that manual intervention and extraction, and it requires a lot of different systems to be touched before you can act upon it. So first thing is, getting the data, but then, making sense of it, and then you closing out those gaps in a proper, transparent, and an efficient way. And that's where Resilinc Workflows comes into play, which is it brings all that together in that one integrated system. And it is best for teams that are very much, having various, which are very much in various industries across regions in the globe, which are of various sizes, different company structure, and so on and so forth. So let me go a little bit into the details of some of the core functionalities or the benefits that's associated with the workflows. Now, with the workflows, what you are able to do is you can create workflows at various levels. And let me talk a little bit about what levels mean here. So if your company is managing risk and it is based on a specific event, event is what is called as a level here. And events might have sub-levels such as the parts and partners and sites associated, but the event is the level that we are talking about. Now you may decide to initiate a workflow or a set of actions and tasks at a partner level, or a site level, or a partner level. So these are the 4 different levels that we have, which is at a site, a partner, a part, and an event. And in a few minutes, I'll go into the demo, which will give you a little more sense of what I'm saying and how these levels are set up in the system to make it easy for you. So as I was mentioning, now you can create your workflows at any level. So if your company has a specific policy where all your actions and workflows are dedicated to a specific partner, or you're focused more on a partner level workflows, you can do that. Whereas if it is more at a part level, which is the genome of the supply chain, you could even go to that level and create all your workflows there. Now, the second aspect here is the analytics. Now, with multiple teams all over the world and different stakeholders associated, and if you're a company which has a high-level hierarchy which goes into different business units and different product lines and so on and so forth, you want to bring in that visualization aspect as to see what kind of workflows are out there. You want to be able to track and get much more visibility so that the workflows at the end of the day bring in more alignment, transparency, and reporting across the teams that you're working with. And that's where the Resilinc visualization and analytics that is associated with it allows you to take that or get quickly into the details, and you will be able to understand what are the areas, what are the bottlenecks out there, how's the progress of all these workflows going on, and you can review it based on the different tasks that are open for the owners, the due dates, the priority, the status, various kinds of activities that you're taking, and so on and so forth. Now, Going into the stock and the custom playbook. So as a company, you might have various kind of playbooks and actions associated with a playbook that you would have created for different scenarios. And this could be an example. An example of a playbook could be managing the material shortages. So you might have a set of actions that you each time follow through to make sure you understand what it is. There are no gaps in it, and if there are gaps, some actions are taken to close out that gap. Another example, which is very, very, very vital at this time to go through, is force majeures. So companies, we have been hearing in the news that a lot of companies have been declaring force majeures recently because of the current situation. So you might be already working on a playbook, or you might have already executed your playbook, which is a set of actions that you would go through whenever a force majeure is declared by a supplier or a bunch of suppliers. So if you have your playbooks, you could onboard them into the Resilinc workflows, and you could launch it in a single click so that all the actions and the stakeholders associated with it, the default stakeholders associated with it, the attachments, then the documents and everything gets stored in that one place. We also have these stock playbooks available, which means based on the industry standards, and our experts have created some stock playbooks. So you could also leverage that as you initiate any kind of workflows to start. The next thing that is very, very relevant in this day and age is, as we were talking about, the teams are spread across and there are multiple actions assigned to different team members. So how do you bring in that more? How do you bring in more transparency? How do you bring in the exchange of information seamlessly? So that's where the Resilinc messaging comes into picture, where you can send messages, attachments, and notes to the different stakeholders so that you're in the know whenever there is a progress, and we have WhatsApp and Facebook, and in this day and age, and it becomes very important to have such easy, seamless collaboration access within the system. And that's where the chatting and messaging becomes really important in workflows. The next thing is the workflows, is the automations and the integrations. So you can now you now have automations available in workflows, which allows you to receive notifications for new tasks that are assigned. So let's say you as a program manager, you are assigning different workflows to a bunch of people, or your supply chain organization. So they would get notifications saying that, hey, these are the tasks associated with you. These are whenever any changes are made by the stakeholders, you get notified. And even you get notified for even past due reminders, so that everyone is aware about how important the workflow is, and you are up to date on all the activities that you're responsible for. Again, this is an evolving area for us, which is we are constantly working to add more workflows, automations in place. And the whole goal here is to enable you to eliminate any of the grunt work that you might be doing on a day-to-day basis, and focus more on what actually really matters, which requires your talent. So all the grunt work, we want the automations to do so that you can focus on the ones that is more important at the end of the day. From the integration standpoint, we do support API integrations with your ERP systems or internal systems, so that you will have a one connected, single integrated workspace at the end of the day. And the whole goal here is to reduce any unwanted data interventions or reduce any human errors, so that it's a single source of truth within the Resilinc workflows. Last but not least is the predictive recommendations, which is you might have already learned about the COVID center, the COVID bulletin center that we have. We are extending that to workflows as we move forward, which is AI recommendations and prescriptive suggestions will be showing up, which says which are the areas, which are the suppliers, what are the different scenarios that you should focus on, so that you can initiate easily workflows right from different dashboards in the system itself. And again, this is another evolving area, which makes it a complete package where you have AI recommendations just in front of you to focus on the things that really matter at the end of the day. And again, I'll be going into the details of all of these during the demo, so that it makes sense and you will be able to connect what I've been talking about. So this slide talks about what are some of the critical functionalities that enable you to be more successful and bring in that transparency. So I think I've covered a few examples here, but I'll just run down really quick. which is you can now initiate workflows, as I mentioned, at different levels, partner sites, parts, or events. So if you were to look at it from a reactive standpoint, it's more at the event context. But if you're looking at more from a proactive standpoint, you can build out different scenarios based on the risk factors, and then you can launch a workflow accordingly. Now you can assign the different actions to your team members, which is spread across the world, set start date, end dates, due dates, priorities, and so on and so forth. Document upload and management. So let's take an example where you have an event, and each time an event happens, you need the team to review your business continuity plan, which is a big document. So rather than going to a SharePoint and reviewing it and having multiple systems that the user has to touch, you could have all that in one place so that it's a seamless process that you are going through. We talked about the collaboration center, the email alerts and activity changes. That's a part of it. Activity history is very important. Again, as your teams are working on it as tirelessly, there might be different activities getting triggered, a lot of changes happening on the workflow. So change logs are available so that you can quickly identify what are the changes, who are the changes, who are making those changes. And as a program manager, you get that transparency within the system. Global filters, which is on the right-hand side here, which is mentioned in the right-hand side, is very important, which is if you are an organization which is having a hierarchy that starts all the way from different business units, going to the different product lines that support the business units, to products, to partners at the end, you have these global filters available so that you can start looking at the areas that you're responsible for or your business units are responsible for, and see what kind of a progress is going on from the actions that have been taken. Analytics dashboard, we'll be getting into that in a second. Playbooks we talked about. Last one here is performing bulk operations, which is, let's say you have a bunch of activities, and if you want to change the status or the priority, let's take priority as an example. All of a sudden, there are 10 different workflows that you've created. All of a sudden, you want them to change from a low priority to high. Rather than you going in one by one and changing the status or the priority, you could just apply the bulk operation functionality. So in one click or two clicks, there you go, you are updating all the changes. So it's seamless at the end of the day. So this slide, I'll try to quickly go through this. This is a slide that talks about the structure of the workflow management, just the backbone as to how the different layers are set up. So it's pretty much 5 levels that you see here, starting from the level 1, where you would define what the project is. So in our current, let's take the current situation, which is COVID-19. So if you are a team, if your team is working on different actions and assigning different actions to team members, you would start a project called COVID-19, and just below it is the levels at which you would initiate the workflow. So you could say, I want to look at all the partners that are potentially affected, or let's say if you're going into the granular levels of what are the parts or sites or event affected, you can do that, which is at the level 2. Once you select which level that you are initiating your workflows, then there are sub-levels within that. In this example, I've just focused on the partners, but the same applies to all the part, site, and events. Within the partner, the level 3 is all about initiating your workflows, initiating the playbook and the actions associated with it. And then you can start tagging your stakeholders for the various actions that they are responsible for. Now, within the playbook bucket, you might have sub-actions and different issues that you're managing. So you would create that level of information or that level of tasks. And then the last level is the sub-actions within the playbook vertical, where let's say there are sub-actions. And once all these actions are closed out, you could either tie it back to a completely new workflow or a project. So it's very interconnected that way. From the stakeholder perspective, as we were talking about the multi-channel, it's a multi-channel collaboration system, which means you could have conversations with all the team members or specific team members so that everyone is in the know and there's much more transparency. And this is just a foundation so that as I go into the demo, you would be able to connect the dots and understand how the structure is, and then go and make sense of all that I've been talking about. One last thing before I get into the demo, I just wanted to call out Western Digital, which, as you all know, is one of the pioneers in the supply chain risk management space. We've been partnering with them, and they have actually leveraging the workflows right now, which brings in, what they do is they bring in their entire commodity organization together, and they've been using it to assign tasks and bring in much more transparency to managing the current situation, the supply chains that's potentially getting affected. So they have that built in, that transparency and that seamless workflow. So definitely we want to, this has been built based on what the customers have been requesting and asking for. And we definitely urge you to look at it and make use of it right at this moment where we all need it. So before I go into the demo, this is just an overview of all that we just talked about, right? From, just being more than a project management tool to, onboarding all your playbooks, to the analytics, to the recommendations and dashboards and integrations, everything. So I'll now jump into the demo, and maybe I'll just stay on the slide for 10 seconds as I pull up the demo org here. Okay, so as you all know, this is the Resilinc homepage, and it's a demo environment here. So there are two ways by which you can get into the workflows. The first way is if you are in a specific partner detail. Let me take a step back. Let's say you have a specific partner which is at a high risk. There is something associated with that supplier that you need to initiate a workflow on. You can initiate right from the supplier or the partner a detail page. And this could be not just the partner detail page, it could be from the site detail or the part detail or even an event. So when an event gets to you, you know that there is some risk associated with it, which could impact the supply chain. So you could initiate a workflow, which means it is then connected from the dashboard all the way up to the workflow, the center that we are going to talk to. So here's an example of the partner profile page. So I'm sure you're pretty much aware about the partner detail dashboard. But the new thing that you would immediately notice is the initiate workflow button at the top. So if you identify a partner which is a high risk, you would click on the initiate workflow, and directly it takes you to the workflow center. And then, of course, there are some steps associated after that, which I'll walk in a few minutes. The second way of getting to the workflow center is an icon that we have added on the left-hand side. So workflows, you're going to see the workflow icon. And there are two submenus there, which is the workflow center itself, which is where the day-to-day operations or the fun stuff happens. And the analytics is where the visualization and then all the analytics within the workflow that you've created is shown. And I'll go through each of those right now. So let's start with the workflow center. So once you click on it, I've already opened up here. So you would go into the workflow center, and I'll explain what are the different, some of the different sections and some of the functionalities as I go. So right at the top, the first thing that you would have noticed is the filter. So you can see the filter spans all the way from the company to the tier level. And let me go through a couple of examples. So let's say, as I was mentioning, you're a big company which has multiple entities and multiple product families, product lines, products and categories, partners, etc. You could leverage the filters. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you are responsible for a specific business unit. Let's say these are some of the business units that your company has. So in this case, let's start with company. So company is Mars Technology. These are the different business units that are a part of the company. And let's say you're responsible for the pharma as an example. If you select pharma, what happens immediately is now all the product families now get honed into that specific business unit that you're responsible for, and it goes all the way up to the categories and the partners you're responsible for. Which means if there are multiple entities working on the workflow, you can just focus on the suppliers, on the categories that you're responsible for, and the others can focus on the ones that they are a part of. Once you set your workflows, once you set the filters, the benefit of it is everything beneath it, which is any workflow that you're creating is now going to be filtered by whatever filters that you have applied at the top. And I'll show you what it is in a second. But once you set your global filters, you would then save your selection, which means the next time you log out, log in back, the preferences that you have just set is going to be retained, and you're just focusing on the ones that matter to you. So I'm going to just take that out so that I can still show everything for you. Let's go to the second section on the bottom section here, which starts off by the different tabs that you see. So we talked about the 4 levels at which you can initiate a workflow. So that's what you see here. So this is the partners, the events, the parts, and sites. And I'll get to the projects in a few minutes. But these are the 4 levels at which you can initiate a workflow. The table that you see beneath is where any workflow that you have created would be shown. In this example, I have in this scenario, I've created a few workflows. That's why you're going to see it. For the first time, you might not see anything, which means you haven't initiated a workflow. And there are some buttons on the top, which will allow you to initiate the workflow. There are playbooks, etc. Within the table, let me quickly run down what are some of the columns here so that you can now tie it back to some of the next steps that I would be doing here. So in this context, or in this level that I'm in, which is the partner level, you can see the first column is the partner. So you can see all my partner workflows that I've created. In this example, looks like packaging solution. It's a supplier. It's actually a supplier name in this demo org. But you can see for packaging solutions, I've actually created 2 workflows that's going on, and you can see the status, the priority, if there are any sites associated with it, what are the categories that they fall under, if it's a tier 1, tier 2, or a tier 3, or any tier supplier, you can initiate a workflow for that. What's the revenue impact? And as you go to the right, you're going to see what are the actions that you've assigned for that specific supplier. So actions that you're taking, who are the owners, what is the start date, end date, and so on. And there are some actions on the right-hand side as well, which is action in the sense you can add your attachments, message, your activity log, etc. Now, before I go into a specific workflow and create it, let me start by clicking on the Manage Playbook button here. Once I click on it, this is where all the, the stock playbooks and the custom playbooks can be created. So the stock playbooks that we have created are the ones that you see at the top. So let's say the playbook is finding an alternate source. And in this case, looks like there are 5 different steps that are associated with that playbook. So those are what we have configured for you. Let's take an example where you want to create something which is completely custom. So what I did was I just went ahead and created one today morning, which is for COVID-19. Again, this is not a playbook that we are recommending because I just created it's just an example here. But you can see I just added 2 different actions, which I felt is important, which would be a part of the whole process that you might be following. Well, the first action here is reviewing the impact of the countries wherever the situation is getting worsened, and then what are the suppliers in the region. So you would perform that assessment. What I also did is when I added the action, I also added some descriptions as well. So here, as I expanded, you can see what the description is, and all these are editable, which means, as I click on it, I can add new workflows, add new playbook actions, or if the description is what I need to update, I can update it as well. The other interesting thing here is you can now assign default owners to your actions. Let's say each time a specific action is triggered, you can assign a default owner. So you know that whenever reviewing has to happen, reviewing of the country impact, it is in this case Daniel who has to look at it. So we have automated that piece where Daniel is responsible. And when I launch the playbook, Daniel gets assigned to that action that we're looking at. So in this case, let's say Daniel is the person who's responsible. If I want to add someone else, I could quickly go in and add myself, which is Sandeep Ramachandran, and then I'm also now responsible now I'm also another default owner in this case. So going back, so I'm going to select Daniel and just take mine out so that we go to the workflow. Let's say if you want to create another one, third one, you would just click on Add New. So you can see that the action is now something that you can add. There are a set of actions that you see here. For example, if you have to deal with a supplier agreement, or if it's some financial sign-off that is needed, you can add that from the checklist that we already have. Or if you are going to create something completely new, you could say call the supplier. This is one of the action that you want to assign your team member or a commodity manager. You could just add that, click on the plus, which means that's an action that has been added. One other interesting thing is I was talking about, how it is an integrated system, which means you don't have to go to multiple systems and start looking for things. So let's say whenever we launch a playbook, we want certain documents to be available for the owners to review, so that they don't have to go to SharePoint and look at it. For example, in this example, I've actually attached a business continuity document, so which is a 20-page document that we have. So in this case, I have attached it so that whenever the playbook is launched for a workflow, the user has access right away in the workflow that they have, and they could download it and start reviewing rather than going to different systems and trying to access it whenever. So this is all about playbooks, and the reason why I wanted to start off with the playbook is because I will be launching a playbook in the demo that I'm doing here. So let me just close that, and let's take the example of launching a playbook or launching a workflow. So here you can see the button create. Once I click on create, and please note that we are in the context of partners. So immediately what you're seeing is a page opens up, which would have a list of fields at the top, which is all about the project that you're creating or the workflow that you're creating. And at the bottom, you're going to see the list of all the partners in your supply chain, tier 1 or tier 2 or whatever you have them populated here. So let's start with the top. I know which supplier that I have to create a workflow on. So let's start with the one at the top. So here I'm going to create something called as COVID-19. Here's the project. Since I don't have an existing project, it's the first time that I'm going to create. I would click on plus. Let's say I have this project already created. If you want to add more and more suppliers, as you understand the risk associated with those suppliers, you would then quickly select an existing project name, and that's the project to which the workflows are going to get added. So here I'm going to add this. I'm going to add this project name, which is for the first time called as COVID-19. Here I have all my actions that I'm going to configure. So we just created a playbook for COVID-19. So I'm going to launch that. So if I click on it, the 2 actions get added. And also, if you note, you can see Daniel Williams, who is associated with one of the actions, has been added by default. So, it reduces 1 step for you. Now, let's say in your organization, you want to create one workflow which has multiple actions in it. Then you can just go ahead and create this. Whereas if you want to have 2 separate workflows for each action, then you would select on this checkbox. And what is action here? The first action is the review impact country and suppliers in the region. That's one action. And the other one is review BCP for impacted suppliers. So you want to create 2 separate workflows, and you want to assign, a start date or an end date, which is different for each of the actions. The owners are different. Then you would just click on this checkbox so that it's going to create a separate workflows when you launch it. And again, I'm going to go through an example which would create a separate workflow, so you know exactly what I'm meaning here. Some of the other things that you would add here is the start date. I know this is a critical project that's going on. I'm going to put the start date as today. Let's say by next Tuesday, I want this to be completed. Priority, medium. If you want to change it to high, you can do that. Status, let's start with new. These are some optional fields such as your projected cost for the workflow. What is the budget, actual cost, etc. I don't think it is relevant right now. But the next section that you're seeing here is the suppliers itself that you want to select for this workflow. So here you can select one or multiple different suppliers. You can search for your supplier that you're interested. So let's say I'm going to search for something called as Able Electronics. You can add that supplier, or if you have a bunch of suppliers that you want to select, you can do that as well. Or if you go to, I'll get into a specific supplier in a minute, but let me explain what are some of the table columns that you see here. Now, you can filter by the categories that are associated with those suppliers. So you can see here it's external packaging and packaging. These are the 2 different categories associated with the supplier. So you can filter by the categories. As you go to the right, you can see the risk factors also showing in. So if your company has configured risk factors such as financial or BCPs or recovery or geopolitical, etc., any number of risk factors that you can configure in the Resilinc system, those are going to be shown here. So the risk scores are going to be shown here. And the reason why I explain that is, now let's say you are trying to build out a criteria and find out the suppliers that fall under that criteria. And the criteria that I'm going to show you here is I want to see all my suppliers which have a high financial risk, at the same time have a high recovery risk. So here, I'm going to build that criteria out, which is I'm going to see all my suppliers where the risk score is greater than, let's say, a 6. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the risk scale in Resilinc. So it's a scale between 1 to 10, 10 being the highest risky, 1 being the lowest risky. So the higher it is, which means that I want to see the suppliers that are highly risky in this example. Now, the second criteria that I talked about is the set of suppliers who have a high recovery time. So which means it takes, let's say, 30 weeks for them to be 100% operations if they're affected. So such kind of suppliers is what I'm interested in. So I would then click on greater than, let's say, the risk is a 7 as well. Once I click on it, I'm going to get the subset of suppliers. In this example, looks like Able Electronics is the one which falls under that category. So I would then select that supplier and then launch the workflow right away. So let me just, I don't want this workflow. I have a predefined supplier that is in mind. So I'm going to just take out my filters here a second. Okay, so now the filter, now it goes back to the original view. Let's say the supplier that I want to initiate a workflow is, let's say, Stallone Industries. So Stallone Industries, as soon as I select the supplier, what you might see is the add sites and parts get enabled. And what that does is, let's say you are initiating a workflow, but what flexibility we have added is instead of you going and creating a dedicated site level workflow, I want to just bring everything together, which is within a partner that I've selected. I want to select a couple of sites or a couple of parts that are going to be affected. And those are the ones that I need to focus on. So here now immediately you're going to see the sites that the supplier uses for manufacturing or processing for you. And you can see also, let's say if there are any parts there, I'm sure there are some parts associated, and you could then select the specific part that is being manufactured in that site for you. Now, once you do your selections, all your fields at the top are made or updated. You would then click on submit. And then now all of a sudden you can see that the two actions that we are, the workflow that we initiated for Stallone Industry has been added. And you can see there are two different workflows here. The first one is for the action. If you recall, there were two actions. One was for reviewing the impact country, and the second one is for reviewing the BCP for that impacted supplier. The only thing now, you know that for the second action, it is someone else who is responsible, or someone else is also responsible along with Daniel. So here I would say, let me add myself here. So Sandeep is also responsible. These are the two people who are responsible to close that action. So that's what I've done. So you can see Sandeep and Daniel are responsible to close that out. Let's say in this case, I want the second action to be started as soon as the end date is as soon as the first activity ends, which is I would say 14th is the first one. So I would say from 15th onwards, the starting this project starts, and this should end by the 20th, no later than that. Once you make all your changes, then again, if you want to change your priority, you can double click on this. It is as simple as that. You don't have to go to a completely different wizard structure. Rather, you can just double click on these and you can update it. So it's as easy as it can get. Once everything is done, you would then click on the save, which means that workflow has been created successfully. And what happens is immediately an email gets triggered to the workflow owner. So Daniel and me will get notified saying that, hey, this project or this workflow has been assigned to you. These are the actions that you're responsible to complete. This is the due date. And then that's a trigger for anyone who is not using the system right away. They could come into the system and start working and sharing the details of what they've been doing. One thing that you might have already noticed here, or if not, you can see that the attachment, I did not attach anything, but if you recall, the playbook had a default attachment. And if I click on it, that's been added to the workflow actions that we have in this case. So this is the business continuity document that was added in the playbook. And the benefit, as I mentioned, user pulls up the BCP and they have to go through the different steps, if the detailed steps, and they could just download it and start reviewing it from one place. If you want to start messaging the different stakeholders, in this case, Daniel and I are the members. I would click on the messaging, and you can start sending your messages to Daniel. So you could say, hey, Daniel, are we reviewing the status? This is a message that you would post, and then Daniel would get notified saying that, hey, someone has posted a message, and then you can take a look at it. Looks like there is a message which is out here. So you can see a red indicator. So if I click on that, you can see there's one message from someone. If I click on it, okay, there you go. So it looks like Daniel has sent me a message, and let's assume there are 10 different people who are a part of this workflow. Everyone would be linked to this all group. So this is a channel which has everyone who's a part of that workflow. And if I want to do a one-on-one message with Daniel, I could just send another message. But let's say in this case, the question is the California site still operating under lockdown? We are still investigating that. We'll keep you posted. So once you send your message, now everyone is on the know that this is the action that you're taking, and this along with all your supply chain insights, it's available to them. Activity log is another thing. So any activities and actions that are being done, that will be captured here. So in this case, looks like only a workflow has been created as people change the status, etc. You're going to see the activity logs getting filled in with all the details. So you can see the status getting changed, attachments getting removed, added, the priority state updated, etc. So this is at a partner level that we talked about. Let's talk about if it's at an event level. What you would do is very similar. The only difference is when you go and create the workflow, you're going to see the list of all the workflows there. You're going to see the list of all the events. Let's say I know there's one of the events that I need to take an action on. So I'm going to search for that. So it is 58th update for COVID-19 because I know there are certain suppliers that got affected. If I click on it, it now takes me to the details of all the partner sites and parts that were affected. And this now links to the event war room. So in the event war room, you might have been notified that these are the events, these are the suppliers potentially affected, these are the sites and parts affected. So all those are brought into the workflow so that you can quickly hone into the ones that you need to take an action on. So in this example, you can see that I'm in the partner section, and you can see there's a column called impacted status. So let's say the supplier has confirmed an impact. I could just search for those, and you can see that these are the suppliers that have confirmed an impact with a downtime. And in this example, let's say this supplier, I know it's critical for my operations, and it has a 52-week downtime that they have confirmed. So I would then initiate a workflow for that supplier. Pretty much everything remains the same. You can then select your suppliers or sites if you want to, but rest is the same as what we saw in partners. The last one here is the projects. Now, let's say COVID-19 is a project that we created, and let's say there are multiple suppliers, multiple actions that are being taken, but you can see that now you can review the progress of that project in the projects tab. So in this case, COVID-19 is the project that I created. There are 2 different actions. These are the owners that are a part of. And as people complete their task, you can see that the progress percentage increases. So in this case, there are 2 tasks. Let's say Daniel did close the first task. So he has closed it, added a comment, and once he saves it, you can see that the project has been now 50% complete. So in your case, you can imagine there are a lot of suppliers, a lot of actions being taken, and as the team closes all these actions, from a executive standpoint, you can see there's a lot of progress going on, and you can share share the details of what has been completed, what is still in progress, and so on and so forth. I think one last thing that I'll show here is, let's say, in fact, 2 things. Let's say if you have these workflows, you don't want to go and create every time another supplier is added, not a supplier, let's say another action needs to be added. You don't have to go and create a new workflow. Rather, you can say, let's say I'm going to select this supplier. You can click on the clone button. So automatically a new workflow has been created. The only difference here is you're going to add a new action. So let's say this is not what you want. You want a new action called as, let's say, supplier agreement. So that's now a new action that has been added. Let's say a 3rd person has been added as an owner. I'm going to take these people out. And once you make all these updates and changes in start date, end date, you would just click on save, and the changes are saved. And this email gets triggered to John in this case saying that, hey, this new action has been assigned to you. Please take a look at Two other things, or one last thing here is if you want to perform bulk operations, as I mentioned, you would select the ones that you want to make changes to, click on the bulk operation icon, and then now it takes you to the similar page where you can say for these two actions that are listed at the bottom, I want to change the status to just high. So that, in one click, let's say there are 10 different workflows, all of a sudden, all these 10 gets updated once you do the bulk operation. So that is pretty much the workflow center. As I said, this is where the day-to-day operations and updates and everything happens. But let's say if you are an executive, if you're in an executive meeting, you want to see what is the progress of all the projects that's going on at a business unit level, at a product line level, who are the owners who are working on, what are the open tasks, etc. We have the analytics dashboard available for that. So if I click on it, this is the analytics dashboard for you, which starts off by the filter at the top. So if you're interested on a specific set of business units or a specific set of partners for which you have initiated a workflow, you can apply the filter. Or if you want to see it for the entire enterprise, you don't have to apply any filters, and you can see how many workflows are available out there or open out there. It looks like there are 10 out there. And these are the different statuses from hold to mitigating or in progress closed. To what are the priorities. Looks like there are a few which are high priority, of 2 of them low, and 5 of them which are medium. Now you can see by owners how many workflows are there. Looks like in my case, one which is in assessing, 3 of them have already closed, and a few other statuses. Looks like one is on hold because there's something going on where I had to put that workflow on hold. And again, it is very interactive. If you don't want to see any closed ones, you could just click on the closed here so that those are taken out, and you just focus on the other statuses to start. If you want to see the breakdown by the due date, so you can see the past due. There's one which is already past due. There's 7 which is due in the next 30 days, 60 days, and which is beyond 60 days. That also. So these are the different buckets available. At the bottom, you have the project table that we saw in the workflow center. And the whole point of us bringing in the project table is, let's say you're in the meeting with your executives, there are a quick decision taken, and you say, these projects, we can just go ahead, these workflows, we can just go ahead and close it. So you can just on the go, rather than going on the workflow center, you could just say, I want to change the status to closed, and I'm good with it. I'm just changing it. So you can save it, which means you have one less thing to worry about rather than going through multiple steps and closing it. Now, 2 other cards that I want to explain is one, the activity log. So, whatever activities are being performed on these workflows, you can start seeing them getting registered. So let's say if it is something called as attachment loaded, if you search for it, you can see all the different workflows and actions where, an attachment has been added or removed, what date, who, etc. The one last thing, which is one of my personal favorites, is, as an individual, I want to focus on what are the actions and workflows that are available to me for me to complete. So my workflow is dedicated to that user. So here, what you see is there are 6 workflows assigned to me as a user, and there are 200 messages. So what are the 6 workflows? These are the ones that are assigned to me. So you can see one is already past due. So this is the looks like this is a workflow for an earthquake event. This is the due date, which was April 3rd. It was completed. It should have been completed, the project name, and so on and so forth. And then you can see the due soon, whichever is upcoming, it will be listed. And as I go down, you can see the ones which are further out, a few days out, so that, I'd still have time to get to those actions. Let's say you want to go into one of the past due and quickly close it. I would click on the card itself or the small box, and it takes you to the table at the bottom, filters for the project that you are responsible to close out and which is already past due. And you would also notice here that it's already highlighted in red. So across the tables that you see in Workflow Center, whichever are past due, it's going to be highlighted in a red color so that you can quickly identify, these are the ones which are past due versus which are still out there. There's still time for you to complete. Let's say in this case, you could, of course, you could go and change the status to closed and then save it. It gets saved. But let's say, during your meeting, these are the few that I know has been completed. So I would just go and select the few action or few workflows that I want to close it. So I would select these checkboxes, and once I save, at once all the workflows get closed, whichever you have selected. So rather than you going into the table and updating, you have an easy way to use these checkboxes and close it easily. So again, the whole point of the workflows is to, as much as possible, bring in much more transparency in the actions that you're doing, bring in all the teams together, make it much more organized at the end of the day. And you as an organization, you have a process in place, and especially at times like what we are going through, each minute, each moment is important, and you need to have a defined standard process that you need to follow and stay away from emails and Excels. And this is a good place for you to automate some of your manual things that you might be doing today otherwise. So that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to cover. So Hira, I just pass on to you. I don't know if you have any questions, but I think I'll now switch the ball to you so that you could go into the final few slides.
Thanks, Sandeep. Thanks for that insightful demonstration and kind of an overview of the solution. I'll take a couple of questions that have come in, but I also wanted to, one of the questions was also about how do I get started? What does the onboarding look like? So just wanted to share the promotion that we have right now that's going on. We at Resilinc want to make sure that we give everybody, all our customers, a platform that they can use and that can facilitate your mitigation efforts. So what we want to extend to you until July 1st is the Resilinc Workflows, absolutely free of cost. It's a quick way to sign up for it. So either using the link here on the screen, or quick access is also on your home screen on the top right. There's a section called What's New, and the link is also posted there. So that's all you need to do to get started. Once my team receives that notification, we'll enable your instance within 24 hours. We have quick training videos that will be sent to you, one-on-one training sessions. So we'll really handhold you and your teams to make sure that you guys can utilize the value from the Workflow Center. So that's quick on that. Just wanted to also go into some questions that have come in, and anything that we cannot answer, we'll get back to you. But the first question was, Sandeep, maybe if you can take this, who receives the email notification when a workflow is created, and can this be switched on or off?
Yeah, I know we briefly touched upon it. I couldn't get to the settings page, but there is a settings page in Workflows where you can enable or disable the notifications that enable the notifications that you want to receive, which means if a workflow is initiated, you will get a notification saying that, hey, this person has initiated a workflow to you, and this is the start date, end date. These are the actions. So you can decide to receive that or not receive it, switch on or switch off. The other notification, which is also associated, which I couldn't touch upon, is any changes in the activities. For example, let's say when I change the status to closed, you want to make sure other team members are aware about the change. So you can decide to enable that notification. So you get notified for any changes happening in the workflows that you're responsible for. And the third one is the past due reminder. So if there are any workflows which is due in next, let's say 1 week or next 5 weeks, you can decide to select that date or the time frame, and then you would get notified. Again, that is configurable as well. So long story short, yes, you can switch it on, switch it off. And more importantly, something to note here is that this is user specific setting, which means if you want to enable the notifications, whereas your colleague would like to receive, does not want to receive notifications, they could separately configure the settings accordingly.
Great, thanks, Sandeep. And maybe I'll follow up to that. Another one that came in was, is the system set up to send reminders to users when their tasks are coming due?
Sorry, Hira, I lost track of it. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So is the system set up to send reminders to users when their tasks are coming due?
Yes. So as I talked about, so there is an option to select past due reminder notifications. I think there are five different time frames that you can select, which is 1 week before the due date. I want to get notified, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks. I want to get notified. So you have that setting available, and you can just enable that.
Great. And then maybe we'll do one or two more. So can you explain external teams? Does this mean suppliers?
Yeah, so the whole concept that we wanted to introduce was external. This would include the suppliers as well as any other consultants who are a part of your organization who are considered as external. So currently in the phase one, we have just gotten to the case where the folks are the consultants or people who are working closely to support you in this engagement. In the phase two, which is as we are currently working on, is to extend this to the suppliers. So right away it is not available, but as you in the next couple 1 or 2 months or a few months that we have, we are trying to get that to you as soon as possible, so you can reach out to the suppliers.
Great. And then question was, do users need to be onboarded to the platform to be added to projects? And I can take that one, Sandeep, but please chime in if you need to. So yes, the answer is yes. The users need to be onboarded onto the Resilinc platform in order for you to assign a task or associate any task to them in the project. I don't know, Sandeep, if you wanted to add on to that or anything.
Yeah, I think you covered that. So yeah, I think we're good there.
Great. Okay, so I know we're right at the top of the hour, and I did want to wrap up here. We do have a couple of more questions, but we will respond to you by the end of day today. Just wanted to thank everybody for taking out the time to attend our webinar today. We know that these are busy times, but we hope that the Workflow Center can really be a part of the solution to support your mitigation efforts. So thank you once again from all of us at Resilinc. We wish you all health and safety, and we look forward to connecting with you all soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Goodbye.